It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness. You give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only.
So today, I'm gonna start you guys off with a story. See, I'm not gonna give like crazy context in, but it's about this king, right? And he's above this nation, and this king actually makes and decides to make a statue of himself that people are supposed to bow down to. Even his people around him, his council, and him say, hey, if you don't bow down to the statue when these bells ring, we're gonna throw you in a furnace. Seems a little weird, right? I don't know if you've seen a furnace big enough to throw a body into. I haven't, but that's kind of scary. So if you didn't bow down to the statue, then at the certain time of the day, then they're gonna throw you in this furnace. So time goes on, and word gets around that there's 3 guys that aren't bowing down and worshiping the statue. See, here's the problem. They then are taken to the king, and he's like, why are you doing this? And they're like, we don't believe in this. And so he's like, all right, well, if you're not going to do it, you're going to get thrown in the furnace. So they get thrown into the furnace, and I think they're going to die, right? Have you ever stepped on a hot fire? Obviously, it's going to do some damage, especially if it's a furnace. Well, they go in the furnace, and you probably expect some screaming, some torment, whatever that looks like. No, these guys are just chilling in the fire. And they actually see 4 figures, and the king's like, what is going on? And he calls them back out, and there's not even a scratch on them. See, why am I telling you this? You're like, this is a weird story. Where did you get this? What kind of, like, was it nonfiction, fiction, one of those two? Which one did you get that from? Well, actually, this is a story in the Bible. This is actually in the book of Daniel about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, my main homies. They're actually pretty awesome. If you ever checked out that story, definitely do it. It's pretty wild. See, last week we talked about how Jesus makes the Bible clear. Well, to be honest, Jesus isn't always in everything that we read in the Bible. We talked about how Jesus makes God more clear in the Bible and his relationship with God and humans. But what do we do with the rest of the Bible? What do we do about the verses that we read that are kind of weird? Some are scary, some are confusing. What do we do with those? We can't just neglect those. We're told that the Bible can change us, that it can help us, but when we are told about the Bible, but then when we actually read it, it's kind of, there's a difference in there, right? So what are we missing? Is there something different of how we can read this? Understanding of what the Bible is and what it is meant to be can help us change our perspective of how we've seen it before. See, what you need to understand is this. The Bible is made up of 2 big sections. The Old Testament, which is like the Jewish Bible, talks about the Israelites, the people, and God's relationship with them, pre-Jesus. Then there's the New Testament, which is about Jesus, his ministry, the church that started after his life and death and his resurrection. So with that, though, too, we also have 66 different documents within the Bible. Let me explain it this way. Think you have a stack of books here, maybe like, say like 10 high. You got different books. You got history, you got novels, you got comedy, maybe you got some like scariness in there, whatever. Well, you have all these books and you're trying to find similarity between all of them or trying to understand the context within each one. See, if we don't understand that the Bible is made up, you're reading one document out of 66 different documents, then we're missing something very important. We're missing context. See, to emphasize this, we're going to look at 2 different scriptures. The first one is 2 Timothy 4:11 through 13, and this is what it says. Only Luke is with me. Bring Mark with you when you come, for he will be helpful for me in my ministry. I sent Tychicus to Ephesus. So obviously, this is kind of weird, like some interesting names in there. Well, context can help make sense of this passage. You're probably thinking, I hear some names, but I don't really understand it. Well, here's some context to it. So this is actually a second letter to a guy named Timothy. Timothy is a pastor at a church in Ephesus where a bunch of people are struggling with different things. This letter is written from his mentor named Paul. Paul is a mentor of Timothy and a very close friend. Paul, also a pastor, he likes to go to different churches, help people out. He likes to make letters. Great stuff. Love Paul. He made a lot of different books within the Bible. See, those are some context, and we're already gaining so much. We know that Paul is writing to Timothy, and he's wanting him to come and bring some things with him. He's telling him to bring a person. If you read some verses before, he actually tells Timothy a bunch of people have left him, and that's why he says to bring Mark with you when you come. Here's another passage of scripture you probably all have heard or seen read before. I don't think you even have to be in church to know this verse because we see it in sports everywhere. It's Philippians 4:13, and it says this: "For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength." Do you think you know what this means, what it actually means? See, Paul, the guy that wrote this letter, he's writing this letter to Philippi, this church, right? And he is actually in prison. He's in prison for something that he believes in. He believes in the gospel, and he's in prison for his faith. See, it's not talking about, hey, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and you try to do a 6-foot vertical jump to a net. That's not happening, right? He's not actually talking about that. He's talking about contentment. See, Paul believes in his relationship so much with Jesus that he says even when struggle is happening around him, even though he's in this really bad situation, he knows what he's fighting for. Context brings clarity. Think about this. Imagine you find a note on the ground and it's talking about how Bobby Joe likes Susie or something like that. Well, you're smart enough to know that you can't just take it and run with it because you don't know context. Well, that's just like the Bible. If we don't understand the context to what we're reading, then we're just playing the guessing game of what we have. The next time that you read a scripture that you don't understand, try asking these questions. Who wrote it and who was it written to? Why was it written down? What made people think this information was so important to write down? And is it helpful for me or not? I'm gonna give you another thing. Don't just read one single verse. Read the verses before it. Read the verses after it. That helps with context. Whenever you read Paul's letters, to know it's a letter from Paul, it says at the beginning, Paul's writing this letter to so-and-so. So that helps a lot. So guys, context creates clarity. And clarity helps us discover why it was written down, what is written down, and how does it helpful to us. So what if you and I made the decision to stop play the guessing game and try to figure out a verse out of just guessing what's going on, and we actually took courage into it and found out the context. Context creates clarity, and that's what's going to help us identify the Bible and why we need it.